The Jedi are over 25,000 years old, and in that time, they've gone from balance-seeking monks to galactic generals to nearly extinct refugees and back again. Today, I'm breaking down every single era of the Jedi Order and how each one changed the galaxy forever, starting with an origin story that contradicts basically everything you thought you knew. Dawn of the Jedi. Here's the thing about the Jedi that nobody talks about. They didn't start as light side warriors. They started as balance seekers. And the difference between those two things is the reason the entire order eventually collapsed. But we'll get to that. Around 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, on a planet called Tython buried deep in the galaxy's core, a group of Force sensitives formed what was called the Jedi Order. Not Jedi, Jedi. And their entire philosophy was built on a concept that would make prequel-era Yoda deeply uncomfortable. They believed the Force had two inseparable halves. The Ashla, which was the light, the Bogan, which was the dark, and something called Bendu, which represented the balance between them. You were expected to study both. You were expected to understand both. Picking a side wasn't enlightenment, it was failure. And Tython made sure you understood that. The planet itself reacted violently to Force imbalances. Lean too far into the light or the dark, and the environment would literally punish you with storms and seismic events. So the planet was essentially the universe's most aggressive philosophy teacher. Oh, you think you've mastered the light side? Here's an earthquake. Think about what you did. The Prime Jedi eventually founded the formal Jedi Order during this era, dedicating it to using the Force to protect life. And here's a wild detail. The droid architect Huyang, the same droid who helps Ahsoka build lightsabers thousands of years later, was created during this period. He's been functioning continuously since the literal dawn of the Jedi. That's not a career, that's a geological event. But the most important thing about this era is what it tells us about the Jedi's future. The original teaching was explicit. Darkness and light must coexist. Later generations would abandon that idea entirely, insisting on pure light side devotion, and it would cost them everything. The irony is that the very first Jedi had it right all along. But if the dawn of the Jedi was about finding balance, the next era is about what happens when that balance gets shattered on a galactic scale. The Old Republic. This era lasted 24,000 years. Let that sink in. The Old Republic stretches from roughly 25,000 BBY to 1,032 BBY, making it by far the longest chapter in Jedi history. Every other era we're covering could fit inside it multiple times over with thousands of years to spare. It's like comparing a puddle to the Pacific Ocean, and for most of that time, the Jedi were locked in an on and off war with the Sith. Not a Cold War, not political tension, actual galaxy-spanning conflict between two orders of Force users who fundamentally disagreed about everything. But here's the thing, the Jedi eventually won, or at least they thought they did. The Jedi-Sith War officially ended in 1032 BBY, and as far as the Jedi were concerned, the Sith were completely destroyed. Every last one of them gone. The Jedi celebrated, dusted off their robes, and moved on, except one survived. Darth Bane. And what Bane did next is genuinely one of the most brilliant villain moves in all of fiction. Instead of rebuilding the Sith army, he looked at the wreckage of his entire order and said, less is more. He created the rule of two, one master, one apprentice. That's it. No armies, no temples, no public presence, just two Sith operating in absolute secrecy, each generation growing stronger than the last. The plan was simple: lose the battle, win the millennium. Every Sith master would train an apprentice more powerful than themselves, and that apprentice would eventually kill them and take their own student. Generation after generation, all building toward one goal: the complete destruction of the Jedi Order, which is, not ideal for the Jedi. Meanwhile, the Jedi had zero idea any of this was happening. They were too busy becoming everything they were never supposed to be. Over the centuries following their victory, they shifted from spiritual balance seekers into rigid, dogmatic enforcers of the light side. They embedded themselves into Republic governance, becoming less like monks and more like government employees with laser swords. Their confidence made them complacent. Their attachment to the Republic made them political, and their refusal to acknowledge the dark side as anything other than pure evil made them blind. Every seed of their eventual destruction was planted right here, in the era they thought they'd already won. The Sith didn't need an army, they just needed patience. But before the fall, there was the peak, and the Jedi's golden age was something else entirely. The High Republic. the Jedi Order. You know from the prequels is a paranoid, rigid institution that tells a literal child he's too old to train and then wonders why everything falls apart. But there was a time when the Jedi were actually good at this. Like, genuinely, unreservedly good. The High Republic era ran from roughly 500 BBY to 100 BBY, and it represents the absolute peak of both the Galactic Republic and the Jedi Order. This was the Golden Age. The Republic was stable, prosperous, and expanding into the Outer Rim with genuine optimism. And the Jedi, they were the best version of themselves they'd ever be. Here's what made this era different. The Order actually trusted its members. They allowed Wayseekers, Jedi who chose to operate completely independent of the Jedi Council, wandering the galaxy and following the Force wherever it led them. No check-ins, no mission assignments, no bureaucratic oversight, just a Jedi and their conscience. They also permitted the Barash Vow, where a Jedi could voluntarily withdraw from all Order activities to meditate in total isolation for as long as they needed. Imagine Mace Windu hearing that request. You want to do what? Sit on a rock for 3 years? Denied. But the High Republic Council said yes, because they understood that individual spiritual growth wasn't a threat to the institution. It was the point. Of course, Paradise doesn't make for great storytelling, so the galaxy threw a wrench into things. In 232 BBY, the Great Hyperspace Disaster ripped starships out of hyperspace across multiple systems, sending debris hurtling toward populated worlds. The Jedi launched a massive, coordinated rescue effort that became the defining moment of the era. Supreme Chancellor Lina Soh responded by commissioning Starlight Beacon, a space station in the Outer Rim designed to be a literal lighthouse for Republic values, which is, not ideal naming for something you're putting in contested space, because the Nihils showed up. These weren't Sith. They weren't an empire. They were anarchistic marauders from the Outer Rim who saw Republic expansion as a direct threat to their freedom and responded with violence. The Nihil conflict tested the Jedi in a way peace never could, forcing them to balance their commitment to protecting life against the creeping temptation to just militarize and crush the problem. And the Nihil didn't just fade away, they escalated. They destroyed Starlight Beacon itself, and their threat persisted for decades, dragging the Jedi deeper into a war they never wanted. The question of whether Jedi should be peacekeepers or soldiers didn't go away, it just kept getting louder. And that slow erosion is exactly what made the next era so devastating, because everything the High Republic built, every freedom, every institution, every ounce of trust, gets systematically dismantled in what comes next. Fall of the Jedi. Remember Darth Bane? The guy who faked the extinction of the Sith and created the Rule of Two, his 1,000-year revenge plot. Yeah, it worked. Every single part of it worked. And the Jedi never saw it coming. The fall of the Jedi is the most devastating betrayal in galactic history, and it didn't happen because the Sith were stronger. It happened because the Jedi trusted the wrong people, all of them. Their army, their government, their most gifted student. Every pillar they leaned on was rotten, and they were too blind to notice. Here's how it went down. In 19 BBY, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, who was secretly Darth Sidious, the culmination of Bane's entire Sith lineage, issued Order 66. This was a secret protocol hardwired into biochips implanted in every single clone trooper during their creation. Not training, not conditioning, actual brain chips. The clones didn't choose to betray the Jedi. They physically couldn't refuse. 1 second they're fighting alongside their Jedi generals. The next, they're pulling the trigger. Across the entire galaxy, simultaneously, thousands of Jedi were gunned down by the soldiers they'd fought beside for years. But the clones weren't even the worst part. Anakin Skywalker, the literal chosen one, the boy the Jedi believed would bring balance to the Force, personally led the 501st Legion into the Jedi Temple. He killed everyone inside. Knights, Padawans, younglings. The prophecy said he'd bring balance, and technically he did. He just did it by destroying the Jedi Order entirely. Whether that makes him a tragic victim of Sith manipulation or the instrument of cosmic destiny is a question fans have been screaming about for 20 years, and honestly, both answers are correct. What followed was the Great Jedi Purge, which lasted 16 years from 19 BBY to 3 BBY. The newly formed Galactic Empire didn't just stop at Order 66. They created the Imperial Inquisitorius, a squad of Force-sensitive hunters tasked specifically with tracking down surviving Jedi. Here's the fun part. The Inquisitors were former Jedi themselves, captured, tortured, and broken until they agreed to serve the dark side and hunt their own kind. which is, not ideal. By approximately 1 BBY, the Empire believed it had nearly finished the job. Out of an order that once numbered in the thousands, roughly 30 Jedi were still alive and still following the path. 30 from thousands. That's not a defeat. That's an extinction event carried out by the people you trusted most, orchestrated by a revenge plot that had been running quietly in the background for a millennium. The Sith didn't outfight the Jedi, they outweighted them. And that patience is what makes the whole thing so terrifying. But if the fall itself was devastating, the 19 years that followed were somehow worse. The reign of the Empire. For 19 years, the Jedi didn't exist. Not as an order, not as an institution, not as anything the galaxy would recognize. From 19 BBY to 0 BBY, the most powerful peacekeeping force in galactic history was reduced to a handful of people trying very hard not to die. Which is, not ideal. Here's the thing about this era that makes it so different from everything before it. Every other period we've talked about had structure. Councils, temples, codes, ranks. The reign of the Empire had none of that. Surviving Jedi weren't following a doctrine anymore. They were making it up as they went, deciding individually what being a Jedi even meant when there was no council to answer to, no temple to return to, and no code being enforced by anyone but themselves. Some of them fought back, some of them gave up entirely, and some of them built something new. The Hidden Path was an underground railroad network designed specifically to shelter surviving Jedi and Force sensitives from Imperial hunters. They operated safe houses on planets like Mapuzo and the Holy Moon of Jeddah, smuggling fugitives from one hiding spot to the next. Think about that for a second. The Jedi went from commanding fleets and advising senators to hiding in basements and using fake names. Galaxy-spanning peacekeepers turned into fugitives, relying on the kindness of strangers just to survive another week. Then there's Obi-Wan Kenobi, arguably the most important Jedi left alive, and he spent roughly 10 years doing absolutely nothing on Tatooine, just sitting in the desert, watching a kid grow up from a distance, waiting. That's what the Jedi became. One old man in a cave, staring at a moisture farm, hoping nobody noticed he existed. By 9 BBY, the Inquisitors escalated their hunt and nearly found him, but he managed to stay hidden long enough to fulfill the one task that actually mattered. Because at the end of those 19 years of darkness, Obi-Wan handed the legacy of the entire Jedi Order to a farm boy named Luke Skywalker, a kid who had never seen a lightsaber, never heard of the Force in any meaningful way, and had zero connection to the institution that once shaped the galaxy. He inherited a dead religion from a man the Empire thought it had already buried, and that's the paradox of this era. It was the worst thing that ever happened to the Jedi, and it might have been the best thing too. The old order was bloated, rigid, and blind to its own failures. It took near total extinction to clear the slate. Luke didn't carry the baggage of 1,000 generations of institutional dogma. He carried a lightsaber and a name, and he built something entirely his own. But what he built with that clean slate, that's a complicated story all on its own. The new Jedi Order. Luke Skywalker rebuilt the Jedi Order from literally nothing. No temple, no archives, no council of wise masters stroking their beards. Just one guy, a green lightsaber, and the belief that the Jedi could exist again. Around 11 ABY, he established a Jedi Academy and began training new Force sensitives, eventually building a larger temple on Ossus. And for a while it actually worked. Among his students was his own nephew, Ben Solo, who began training under Luke at around age 10. Ben was strong in the Force, deeply connected to both the Skywalker and Solo bloodlines, and showed enormous potential. Here's the thing, we've seen this exact story before. In 28 ABY, Luke sensed darkness growing inside Ben, and in one terrible moment, he ignited his lightsaber over his sleeping nephew. He didn't swing, he stopped himself almost immediately, but Ben woke up, saw his uncle standing over him with a weapon, and the betrayal broke something that couldn't be unbroken. Ben Solo became Kylo Ren. The temple burned, the students scattered or died. Think about what that means. The prequel-era Jedi fell because they were rigid and afraid of attachment. They pushed Anakin away, and he became Vader. Now, Luke, who literally redeemed Vader through compassion, made the exact same mistake. He let fear override trust, and the cycle repeated. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. For over 25,000 years, the Jedi kept making the same mistake. They abandoned the Jedi principle of balance, treated the dark side as an enemy to be eradicated, and every single time, it destroyed them. The Old Republic Jedi fell to the Sith. The prequel Jedi fell to Palpatine. Luke's Jedi fell to Kylo Ren. Same philosophy, same result. But then came Rey. Following the Battle of Exegol in 35 ABY, Rey Skywalker founded a new Jedi Order, and she did something no Jedi leader had done in millennia. she built a yellow lightsaber. Not blue, not green, yellow, a color that symbolizes balance, renewal, and a deliberate step away from pure light side allegiance. And that's the detail that makes the entire 25,000-year timeline click into place. Remember the Jedi on Tython, the very first Force users we talked about? They believed the Force was two halves of a whole, Ashla and Bogan, light and dark, not enemies, but partners. Then the Jedi abandoned that philosophy, committed entirely to the light, and spent the next 25 millennia paying for it. Rey's yellow lightsaber is a philosophical return to that original idea. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a Jedi leader is acknowledging what the founders on Tython knew all along. You can't have light without understanding dark. Is it going to work? Nobody knows. Rey's order is new, untested, and the galaxy isn't exactly known for letting the Jedi exist in peace. But for the first time in over 25,000 years, the Jedi aren't repeating the same mistake. The whole story is a circle, from Tython to Rey, from balance through thousands of years of imbalance, back to balance again. Whether the Jedi can hold on to it this time is the only question that matters. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.